Okay, hello everyone. I want to take a few moments here to talk about the concept of diminishing returns. And this has to do only with outputs. That is, when businesses, or generally businesses when they produce things, as they add more workers or other inputs, as they add more input, at first each one produces more, but at some point it doesn't as much. And that's called diminishing returns. And let me just kind of go through an example of that. I'm going to try to share here again my screen. And let's say, for example, we'll talk about the pizza making place. And the question will be, by adding more workers, what happens to output? So let's say we just have, let's say, number of workers. And let's say what happens to output. So if there's only one worker, let's say the one worker can produce 4 pizzas per hour. Now, if we add a second worker, oftentimes what happens is the output increases more than the one before. So in this case, let's say with 2 workers, output is 9. That is, this person added 5 to the output. Why does this happen? Well, with just one worker, they have to do everything. They have to roll out the dough, put on the ingredients, and watch the pizzas in the oven. Whereas a second worker they can start splitting up the jobs and focus more on their jobs, and therefore the output can increase. And let's say we add even a third, and let's say output per hour increases to 15 pizzas per hour. So remember, output is the Q, the quantity, and that's how much it's going up by. What happens if we keep increasing? Well, let's say we add a fourth and we find out that the output per hour is 20, and we add a fifth worker, and let's say it goes to 24. See, we have a sixth worker, goes up to 27, and let's end with a seventh worker, and let's say it's 26. Well, let's look at what the marginal output is then. It's called marginal product. Well, as you can see, the first worker added to the output of 4. 0 to 4 is 4. The second worker added how much? 5 to the output. Third worker added 6 to the output. The fourth worker added 5. Fifth worker only added 4. The sixth worker only added 3. And the last worker actually reduced output. So what's happening here? Well, what you're going to see is, let's see if I can get some drawing tools up here, is that at this point, these points, you have what's called increasing returns to scale. Over here, this is the diminishing part. Let's see how well this will work here for me. We have diminishing returns here. What's happening is, at first, when a business increases its workers, the workers add more to the output than the worker before. Now we're assuming that each worker has the same ability to produce. It doesn't matter what order they come in. But what happens is there's limitations to their work environment. So what happens is, at first, each worker splits up the duties and they can increase output more than the one before. But the law of diminishing returns is saying, okay, but until a certain point, that'll work. And after that point, it's called diminishing returns. Diminishing returns to scale, that is, as you try to get bigger, as your scale gets bigger, by adding more input, that is, adding more workers, the output still increases. It still goes up, but not as much as the one before. Many people think that diminishing returns happens at number 7 because it's actually taking away from output. That's not the case. It's a really bad situation. But what's happening is you have diminishing returns happening here. But what's happening here is the next worker just doesn't have all the tools, or the kitchen isn't big enough. And so by adding the workers, the output does not increase as much as from the worker before. With worker number 7, what's happening is this worker is actually getting in the way. It's getting too crowded, and output actually decreases. So a business would definitely not want to hire this worker. Now, when we look at later profits, we look at how many workers you want to hire, it doesn't mean you don't hire number 4, 5, or 6. It depends on what the wages are and how much revenue they produce. But the concept that you're needing to understand here is that when a business expands or grows, that is, its scale gets bigger, it's going to be economically good to do so. That is, you want to grow from 1 to 2 to 3 because as you add more input, that next worker adds to the output more than the one before. But again, the law is saying, beyond some point, adding more inputs, adding more workers will not add to the output as much as the one before did. And that's the law of diminishing returns. That's the concept there, that beyond some point. Now, I can notice this as a business owner and say, okay, I'm going to get a bigger kitchen. Well, that's great. So it may not happen, the diminishing returns may not happen after the 3rd worker. It might be the 6th or 7th worker. But every business at some point will have this where by adding more input, that next input will not add to the output as much as the one before. Again, it's a marginal concept. So if someone were to ask, well, by adding one more worker, how much does your output increase? We'd say, it depends. If I have just one worker, adding another worker will add 5 to the output. But if I already have 5 workers, adding one more worker will only add 3 to the output. So again, it's this understanding what that current situation is. How many workers do you already have will dictate as to what the answer to that question is. And again, the concept here that I really want you to understand is this law of diminishing returns, and that's this starting right here from the 3rd to the 4th worker. So I hope this helped in your understanding, and there should be other videos discussing some of the other topics from these chapters.